I signed the papers my son gave me without reading them. "It's just insurance, Mom," he said with that smile I'd trusted for 43 years. A week later, 2 officers stood at my door with handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for insurance fraud." My world shattered until I remembered there was a second signature line on those papers, and the name written there wasn't mine. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 72 years old. For most of my life, I believed that family was everything. I believed that if you loved your children unconditionally, sacrificed for them, and always put them first, they would honor that love. I was wrong. I live in a quiet neighborhood in Sacramento, California, in the same 2-story house where I raised my 3 children alone after my husband Thomas passed away from a heart attack 20 years ago. The house isn't much. Pale yellow paint that's starting to peel, a front porch with creaky wooden steps, and a garden that my late husband planted the year before he died. But it's mine. Or at least, it was. For 30 years, I worked as an elementary school teacher in one of the toughest districts in the city. I taught 2nd grade, and I loved every chaotic, beautiful moment of it. My students called me Mrs. Chen, and I treated each one like they were my own. I attended their graduations, wrote college recommendation letters, and kept every crayon drawing they ever gave me in a box under my bed. Teaching didn't pay much, but it filled my heart in ways money never could. After Thomas died, I worked 2 jobs to make sure my kids had everything they needed. I cleaned offices at night so David could go to college. I sold my wedding ring to help Sarah with her first apartment deposit. I co-signed loans, paid for weddings, and babysat my 5 grandchildren every weekend so my kids could have date nights and career opportunities. I never asked for anything in return. That's what mothers do. We give, and we give, and we give, because we believe our love is building something beautiful. Every Sunday, my kitchen table was covered with food. Homemade dumplings, roasted chicken, fresh vegetables from my garden. My children and grandchildren would gather, and the house would fill with noise and laughter. Those were the moments I lived for. The chaos of little voices, the warmth of family, the feeling that all my sacrifices had been worth it. I'm not a wealthy woman. My teacher's pension is modest, just enough to cover my bills and occasional treats for the grandkids. But I was comfortable. I had my health, my home, and my family. I volunteered at the local food bank every Tuesday. I sent birthday cards to everyone I knew, written in careful handwriting with personal messages inside. I baked cookies for neighbors and never forgot a single grandchild's favorite flavor. I was happy. I was content. I trusted the people I loved most in this world, and that trust nearly destroyed me. My days had a comforting rhythm that I'd built carefully over the years. Every morning I woke up at 6 o'clock sharp, even without an alarm. Old habits from decades of teaching never quite leave you. I'd slip on my gardening gloves and head outside to tend the roses and tomato plants that Thomas had planted all those years ago. The garden was my sanctuary, my way of keeping him close. I'd talk to him sometimes while I worked, telling him about the grandkids, about my day, about everything I wished he was still here to see. By 7, I'd be back inside, preparing breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee and toast would fill the kitchen, and I'd set 2 places at the table, one for me and one for my son David. He'd moved back in with me 6 months ago, right after his divorce from Sarah, his wife. Not my daughter Sarah, which always confused people. He'd shown up at my door with 3 suitcases and tears in his eyes, and of course I'd welcomed him home. What kind of mother turns away her child when he's hurting? David would stumble downstairs around 8, usually looking exhausted and stressed. He worked in insurance sales, a job that seemed to drain the life out of him. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and he'd gained weight since the divorce. He looked older than 43. I'd pour him coffee exactly how he liked it, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and slide a plate of eggs and toast across the table. "You're too good to me, Mom," he'd say, and I'd smile. grateful to have him close again. We'd eat breakfast together and he'd talk about his problems. The divorce was costing him everything. His ex-wife had gotten the house, the car, and half his retirement fund. He had mounting legal bills and credit card debt that kept him up at night. I'd listen patiently, offering words of comfort and encouragement. "You'll get through this, sweetheart. You're strong. You're my son." Sometimes I'd slip him a little money, $50 here, $100 there, just to help him get by. He'd always protest, but I'd insist. That's what mothers do. My weekdays were peaceful and predictable. After David left for work, I'd clean the house, run errands, and meet my friend Dorothy for lunch at the diner downtown. We'd been friends for 40 years, and she knew everything about my life. On Tuesdays, I volunteered at the food bank, sorting donations and packing boxes for families in need. It felt good to help people, to feel useful even in retirement. Weekends were my favorite. My daughter Sarah would drive up from San Jose with her husband and 2 kids. My son Michael would come from Oakland with his wife and their 3 children. The house would explode with energy. Kids running through the hallways, cartoons blaring on the television, toys scattered across every surface. I'd cook enormous meals, enough to feed an army, and we'd all squeeze around my old dining table, laughing and talking over each other. Those Sunday dinners made everything worth it. The years of struggle, the lonely nights after Thomas died, the financial stress, all of it faded away when I looked around that table and saw the family I'd built. I felt rich in the ways that mattered most. I had no idea that behind those smiles, a plan was already in motion, a plan that would cost me everything. The first time I noticed something odd was on a Thursday afternoon in late September. I'd come home from the food bank earlier than usual because they'd had fewer donations than expected. The house was quiet. David's car was in the driveway, but I didn't hear him anywhere. I set my purse on the kitchen counter and called out, "David, honey, are you home?" No answer. I walked through the living room, past the family photos that lined the walls, and noticed the door to my home office was slightly ajar. That small room had always been my private space, the place where I kept important documents, tax records, insurance papers, and the few precious items Thomas had left me. I rarely went in there anymore, maybe once a month to file a bill or find a document I needed. I pushed the door open and found David sitting at my desk, hunched over a stack of papers. My filing cabinet was open, folders spread across the desk in a way I never would have left them. He looked up quickly when I entered, and for just a split second I saw something flash across his face. Surprise? Guilt? It vanished so fast I couldn't be sure. "Mom, you scared me." He laughed, pressing his hand to his chest. "I didn't hear you come in." "What are you doing in here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and curious rather than accusatory. "Oh, just organizing some things for you." He gestured at the papers with a smile. "I noticed last week that your files were kind of a mess, documents all out of order. I figured while I'm living here I could help you get everything organized. Make sure all your insurance information is up to date, your medical records are filed properly, that sort of thing." It sounded reasonable, helpful even. David worked in insurance, so of course he'd know how to organize these things better than I would. And yet, something about the scene felt wrong. My filing cabinet had been locked. I always kept it locked, and now it sat open. I never gave David the key. "That's very sweet of you, honey," I said slowly, stepping closer to see what he was looking at. "But how did you open the cabinet? I keep it locked." "Oh, the key was in your kitchen drawer," he said smoothly, not missing a beat. "The one next to the stove where you keep all the random stuff. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to help." I didn't remember leaving the key there, but maybe I had. My memory wasn't what it used to be. That's what I told myself anyway. "Of course it's okay," I said, even though a small knot had formed in my stomach. "Thank you for thinking of me." He stood up and kissed my cheek. "Anything for you, Mom. You've done so much for me. It's the least I can do." After he left the room, I stood there for a moment, looking at my desk. The papers were spread out, but nothing seemed to be missing. My medical insurance folder sat on top of the pile instead of filed alphabetically where I always kept it. A folder labeled Property Documents was open, showing the deed to my house. I told myself I was being paranoid. David was helping. He was my son. He loved me. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the image of his face when I'd walked into the office. That flash of something I couldn't quite name. I pushed the thought away and closed my eyes, forcing myself to sleep. I should have listened to my instincts. Over the next 3 weeks, I noticed more small things that didn't quite add up. But every time that uncomfortable feeling crept into my chest, I'd talk myself out of it. I was being a paranoid old woman. I was seeing problems where none existed. David was my son, my firstborn, the baby I'd nursed through colic and walked through nightmares and cheered for at every baseball game. He wouldn't hurt me. One evening, I was making dinner when David came into the kitchen with a clipboard and a pen. "Mom, I need to ask you some questions for the insurance audit I'm doing on your policies," he said casually, leaning against the counter. "Just routine stuff to make sure everything's current." "Insurance audit?" I stirred the soup on the stove, confused. I didn't know I needed an audit. "It's nothing serious. Just want to make sure you're getting the best coverage." He clicked his pen. "So, have you had any major medical procedures in the last 5 years? Surgeries? Hospital stays? Anything like that?" I thought for a moment. "Just my knee replacement 3 years ago. You remember, you drove me to the hospital." He wrote something down. Right. And what about any chronic conditions? Heart problems, diabetes, anything the insurance should know about?" "David, the insurance company already knows all this. It's in my files." "I know, Mom, but I'm just double-checking, making sure nothing was missed." His voice was patient, like he was talking to a child. I felt a flash of irritation but swallowed it down. No chronic conditions, just my blood pressure medication and the arthritis in my hands. Same as always. He asked more questions about my doctors, my pharmacy, my medical history going back years. It felt excessive, but he seemed so earnest, so concerned about making sure I was properly covered. When he finally left the kitchen, I stood there stirring the soup and wondering why I felt so uneasy. The following Tuesday, I found something in the recycling bin that made my heart skip. I'd been taking out the trash when I noticed printed forms with my name at the top. I pulled them out and smoothed the crumpled pages. They were insurance claim forms, blank ones with my personal information already filled in at the top. My name, my address, my policy numbers. Why would David print these out and then throw them away? "Just practicing," I told myself out loud, standing in my kitchen with those papers in my trembling hands. He's learning the new system at work. He's using my information as an example because it's convenient. But the forms had dates on them, recent dates, and procedure codes I didn't recognize. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to demand answers. But every time I worked up the courage, I'd remember something that stopped me cold. The time I'd accused him of stealing $20 from my purse when he was 16, and it turned out I'd simply misplaced it. The shame I'd felt, the hurt in his eyes, the way he'd said, "Mom, how could you think I'd steal from you?" I couldn't go through that again. I couldn't accuse my own son of something terrible based on my confused old woman suspicions. So I threw the forms back in the recycling and tried to forget about them. At night, I'd lie awake and rationalize everything. David was going through a divorce. He was stressed and overwhelmed. Maybe he was being a little invasive with my files, but he meant well. He was trying to help his aging mother get organized. That's what good sons do. I thought about my late husband, Thomas, and what he would say. He'd always been the rational one, the voice of reason. "Maggie," he'd probably tell me, "you're overthinking this. The boy's just trying to help." Yes. That's exactly what Thomas would say. So I pushed down the doubt, ignored the warning signs, and convinced myself that everything was fine. It's amazing how skilled we become at lying to ourselves when the truth is too painful to accept. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after I'd found those forms in the recycling bin. It was one of those official-looking envelopes with a plastic window showing my name and address typed in bold letters. The return address read, Pacific United Insurance Company, Fraud Investigation Unit. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing my gardening gloves with dirt smudged across the fingers, and carefully tore open the envelope. The letter inside was typed on heavy corporate letterhead, cold and impersonal. I had to read the first paragraph 3 times before my brain could process what it was saying. Dear Mrs. Chen, we are writing to inform you of a discrepancy in a recent claim filed under your policy number 4478-9821-3304. Our records indicate that on August 15, 2024, a claim was submitted for a lumbar spinal fusion procedure performed at Sacramento Memorial Hospital, totaling $47,132. However, our investigation has revealed no corresponding medical records from the hospital for this procedure, and the attending physician listed Dr. Robert Mendoza has no record of treating you. This matter has been forwarded to our fraud investigation unit. Please, contact us immediately at the number below. I read it again and again. Each time the words became more terrifying. August 15th. I knew exactly where I'd been on August 15th. I'd taken my grandchildren to the Sacramento Zoo. We'd spent the afternoon looking at giraffes and eating overpriced ice cream. I'd been perfectly healthy, walking around in the summer heat for hours. I certainly hadn't had spinal surgery. My legs felt weak, and I had to sit down at the kitchen table. The letter continued, explaining that the claim had been paid out, $47,832 deposited into an account they didn't specify. An account that wasn't mine because I'd never received any money. But what made my blood run cold was the next part. Attached, please find a copy of the claim form bearing your signature. I flipped to the second page with trembling fingers, and there it was, a medical claim form, filled out in neat handwriting I didn't recognize, my name printed at the top, my policy number, my date of birth. And at the bottom, in the signature line, was my name written in what looked like my handwriting. I stared at that signature for a full minute. It looked like mine, the looping M, the careful way I dotted the I in my maiden name, the slight upward slant. But something was off. The pressure was different. The G in my last name had a flourish I never used. It was close, very close, but it wasn't quite right. Someone had forged my signature. I felt like I was going to be sick. I pushed away from the table and walked to the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to breathe. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a computer error or a filing mix-up. Someone had deliberately filed a false insurance claim in my name, forged my signature, and stolen nearly $50,000. But who? The question hung in the air, even though somewhere deep in my gut I already knew the answer. I just couldn't make myself believe it yet. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the number on the letter. A woman with a professional, detached voice answered. Pacific United Insurance, Fraud Investigation Unit. This is Margaret Chen. I just received a letter about a claim I never filed. Yes, Mrs. Chen, we've been trying to reach you. I need to inform you that there's actually a second claim currently being processed under your name. This one is for $63,400 for a cardiac procedure. We've flagged it as suspicious, but we need you to come to our office for an official statement. 2 claims, over $100,000. My vision blurred, and I had to sit back down. Mrs. Chen, are you still there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. I'll come in, but I need you to know, I never filed these claims. I never had these surgeries. Someone stole my identity. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Ma'am, the signature on both documents appears to match the signature we have on file from when you first enrolled in your policy. We'll need to investigate further, but I have to tell you, this looks very serious. You could be facing criminal charges. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Criminal charges. Me. a 72-year-old retired teacher who'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. I hung up and sat in my empty kitchen, staring at that forged signature, and finally let myself think the thought I'd been pushing away for weeks. David had access to all my files. David worked in insurance. David knew exactly how to file these claims. David needed money desperately. My own son had turned me into a criminal. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, the insurance letter spread out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. When I heard David's footsteps on the stairs the next morning, my heart began to pound so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. He walked into the kitchen looking rumpled and tired, yawning as he reached for the coffee pot. "Morning, Mom. You're up early." I didn't respond. I just slid the letter across the table toward him. He glanced down at it casually, then froze. His hand stopped mid-reach for the coffee cup. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. "David," my voice came out stronger than I expected. "I need you to explain this to me, right now." He picked up the letter with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the words, even though I could tell he already knew exactly what it said. "Mom, there must be some mistake." "Don't you dare lie to me." I stood up and something in my tone made him step back. Someone filed false insurance claims in my name. Someone forged my signature. Someone who had access to all my personal information, my policy numbers, my medical history. Someone who works in insurance and knows exactly how to do this. "Mom, please, let me explain." His voice cracked. "Did you do this?" I asked, even though I already knew. I needed to hear him say it. I needed to hear the words come out of his mouth. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried to speak again. "I was going to pay it back. I swear to God, Mom, I was going to pay every cent back before anyone noticed." The confession hit me like a physical blow. My legs went weak, and I had to grip the back of the chair to stay standing. "You did this. You actually did this. The divorce destroyed me financially." His words came out in a desperate rush. "Sarah took everything. The house, the car, half my retirement. I have $70,000 in legal bills. I'm drowning in debt, Mom. I didn't know what else to do." "So you committed fraud. You used your own mother. You made me a criminal." My voice rose with each question. I needed the money. I was going to lose everything. Tears were streaming down his face now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No maternal instinct to comfort him. Just a cold, hollow rage. "How many?" I asked quietly. "How many claims did you file?" He wiped his face with his sleeve. "Just 2. I swear. Just the 2. The woman on the phone said there's a second one being processed for $63,000. I watched him carefully. "That makes 2. So tell me the truth, David. How many?" He couldn't meet my eyes. 4, maybe 5. I lost track. 5 fraudulent claims, over $200,000, all in my name. "What else?" I asked, my voice deadly calm now. "What else did you do?" "Nothing. Just the insurance claims, I promise." "Show me your phone." "What?" "Your phone. Give it to me, now." He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. There was more. So much more. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Mom, please." He reached for my hand, but I jerked away from him like his touch burned. I said, "Get out. Pack your things and leave. Now, before I call the police." "You wouldn't." He looked genuinely shocked. "I'm your son." My son died the moment he decided to destroy me. My voice didn't waver. "I don't know who you are, but you are not my child. Get out." He stood there for a long moment, tears running down his face, looking like he wanted to say something else. But whatever he saw in my expression made him turn and walk out of the kitchen. I listened to him moving around upstairs, packing his things, drawers opening and closing, the sound of a suitcase zipper, footsteps on the stairs. He paused at the front door. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant. I didn't turn around. I just stood at the kitchen window, staring at Thomas's garden, waiting for the sound of the door closing. When it finally clicked shut, I collapsed into the chair and let myself cry. Not for David, but for the son I thought I had, the son who never really existed. After David left, the house felt like a tomb, silent, empty, haunted by the ghost of the family I thought I had. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just wandered from room to room like a stranger in my own home, trying to understand how my life had fallen apart so completely. On the third day, I forced myself to go back into my home office. If David had filed insurance claims in my name, what else had he done? I needed to know the full extent of the damage, even if the truth destroyed me. I started with my filing cabinet, going through every folder, every document, checking dates and signatures. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I found a folder I didn't recognize, tucked in the back behind my tax returns. The label read Property Refinance 2024. My hands went numb as I opened it. Inside was a reverse mortgage application. My house, the house Thomas and I had bought 40 years ago, the house I'd finally paid off 5 years ago, had been used as collateral for a loan for $180,000. The signature at the bottom was supposed to be mine, but just like the insurance forms, it was slightly off. A careful forgery. I stumbled to my desk chair and sat down hard, the folder shaking in my hands. According to the paperwork, the loan had been approved 6 weeks ago. The money had been deposited into an account ending in 7743, an account I didn't recognize, but that wasn't all. I opened my laptop with trembling fingers and logged into my bank account, something I usually only did once a month to check that my pension deposit had cleared. What I saw made the room spin. My savings account, which should have had $87,000, money I'd carefully saved over 30 years of teaching, now showed a balance of $12,300. I clicked on the transaction history with a growing sense of horror. Transfers. Dozens of them, going back 6 months. $500 here, $1,200 there, $2,000, $3,000. All transfers to an external account labeled David Chen Personal Account. He'd been stealing from me for half a year. Small amounts at first, then larger ones as he got bolder. $75,000 gone. My entire safety net, my security for the rest of my life, drained away while I'd cooked him breakfast and listened to his problems and slipped him extra cash because I thought he needed help. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type, but I forced myself to keep searching. I checked my credit report and found 3 credit cards I'd never opened, all maxed out. Total debt, $48,000. There was also a business loan, supposedly co-signed by me, for $95,000 for some company called Chen Financial Solutions, LLC. I'd never heard of it, but I was apparently on the hook for the entire amount. The total damage was staggering. Over $400,000 in debt and stolen money. At 72 years old, I would never recover from this. David hadn't just betrayed me, he destroyed my entire future. But then I found something that made everything so much worse. I was going through David's emails. Yes, he'd been stupid enough to use my computer and stay logged in, when I saw a message thread with the subject line, Mom's Assets, Timeline. My stomach dropped as I clicked it open. The email was from my daughter, Sarah. My daughter. It was dated 2 months ago. David, we need to move faster. Michael's been asking questions about Mom's finances. If he finds out what we're doing before we secure everything, he'll try to stop us. You need to get the house in your name ASAP. Once that's done, we can split everything 50-50 like we agreed. David's response, I'm working on it. Mom trusts me completely. She signs whatever I put in front of her. The reverse mortgage is processing now. Once that clears, I'll get power of attorney and we can liquidate everything. She won't even know what's happening until it's done. Sarah's reply, good. And you're sure she won't get suspicious? She's old, but she's not stupid. She's too trusting. And she's been forgetting things lately. If she asks questions, I'll just tell her she's confused. By the time she figures it out, we'll have everything. Don't worry, sis. Mom made this easy for us. I read the emails 3 times, each word burning itself into my brain like a brand. Sarah. My daughter, Sarah, who I'd helped raise her 2 children, who I'd paid for her wedding dress, who called me every Sunday to say she loved me. She was in on it. This wasn't just David acting desperately because of his divorce. This was a coordinated plan between my 2 oldest children to rob me of everything I had. They'd discussed it, planned it, laughed about how trusting and easy to manipulate I was. The email thread went back months. Dozens of messages between them, strategizing about how to access my accounts, forge my signatures, and divide up my assets. They talked about me like I was already dead, like I was just an obstacle standing between them and money they felt entitled to. There was one more email, sent just 2 weeks ago, that made me physically ill. Sarah had written, "What about Michael? We need to make sure he doesn't get anything. He's always been Mom's favorite anyway." David's response, "Don't worry. Once we have power of attorney, we can structure everything. So he's left out completely. By the time Mom passes, there won't be anything left for him to inherit anyway. We'll have liquidated it all." They weren't just stealing from me. They were planning to cut their own brother out of everything, simply out of spite and greed. I sat in that office for hours, reading email after email, watching my children plot my financial destruction like it was a business transaction. They'd weaponized my love. They'd exploited my trust. And they'd done it all while sitting at my dinner table, eating my food, and telling me they loved me. The betrayal of one child had been devastating. But the betrayal of 2 felt like dying. I don't remember walking from my office to Thomas's chair. I don't remember the moment my legs gave out or when the sobbing started. I only remember collapsing into the worn leather armchair that still smelled faintly of his cologne after 20 years, and feeling like my chest was being ripped open from the inside. The sound that came out of me wasn't crying. It was something primal and broken, a keening wail that I couldn't control. I pressed my face into the armrest where Thomas used to lay his head and screamed into the leather until my throat was raw. How could they do this? How could my own children, the babies I'd carried in my body, nursed at my breast, rocked through fevers and nightmares, how could they look me in the eyes and destroy me? The memories came in violent waves, each one more painful than the last. David, at 3 years old, holding my face in his tiny hands and saying, "I love you all the way to the moon, Mommy." David at 10, crying in my arms after Thomas died, making me promise I'd never leave him. David at 18, hugging me so tight at his high school graduation that he lifted me off the ground. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom. You're my hero." Lies. All of it. Or had it been real once, before greed rotted everything away? And Sarah, my beautiful Sarah. I remembered the day she was born, how she'd wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, and I'd felt my heart expand in ways I didn't know were possible. I remembered teaching her to braid her hair, staying up all night when she had her first heartbreak, holding her hand in the delivery room when she gave birth to her own daughter. "I want to be exactly like you when I grow up, Mom," she'd told me when she was 12. "You're the strongest person I know." Had she really meant it? Or had I always just been a resource to exploit, a bank account to drain when she needed money? I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, working 2 jobs after Thomas died so they could have new school clothes, nice birthday parties, college educations, selling my wedding ring, the last piece of jewelry Thomas had given me, so Sarah could afford her first apartment deposit, co-signing David's car loan when no bank would approve him, even though I knew it put me at financial risk. I'd given them everything, my time, my money, my unconditional love. I'd put them first in every decision, every choice, every moment of my life for over 4 decades. And they'd repaid me by turning me into a criminal, by stealing my savings, my security, my home, by forging my signature and laughing about how easy I was to manipulate. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the realization that I'd never really known them at all. The children I'd loved so desperately were strangers wearing familiar faces. The family I'd built my entire life around was a lie. I pulled myself off the chair and crawled to the bookshelf where I kept photo albums. With shaking hands, I opened the oldest one. Pictures of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations to the beach, David and Sarah building sandcastles, Michael, sweet Michael, who apparently they'd planned to cut out of everything, grinning with his front teeth missing. In every photo, I saw my younger self smiling at the camera, looking so happy and proud. That woman had no idea what was coming. She believed in family. She believed love was enough. She believed her sacrifices would mean something. I wanted to reach through time and warn her, tell her to protect herself, tell her that the people she'd die for wouldn't hesitate to destroy her. But I couldn't. That woman was gone. And so was the family she'd loved. I was 72 years old. I had $12,000 to my name. I was facing criminal charges for fraud I didn't commit. I owed nearly $500,000 in debts I'd never agreed to. I had 2 children who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to money they felt entitled to, and I was completely, devastatingly alone. I crawled to my bedroom and lay on the floor beside the bed, too broken to even climb onto the mattress. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how easy it would be to just give up, to let them win, to let the police arrest me, let the courts convict me, let David and Sarah take whatever was left. I was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of hoping. Tired of loving people who only hurt me. Thomas's face appeared in my mind, not the sick, gray version from his final days, but the vibrant man I'd married. The man who used to tell me I was stronger than I knew. "Chen women don't break, Maggie," he'd say in his gentle voice. "We bend, and then we straighten up stronger." But Thomas had never faced betrayal like this. He'd never had to survive being destroyed by the people he loved most. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, hoping that when morning came, I'd have the strength to face what came next, or the courage to finally give up. I woke up on the floor of my bedroom 3 hours later, my body stiff and aching, my face swollen from crying. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the dust particles floating in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through my window. My mouth was dry, my head pounded, every bone in my body hurt. And then, something shifted. It started as a tiny spark of anger in my chest, small at first, barely noticeable. But as I lay there on that cold hardwood floor thinking about David and Sarah sitting somewhere, probably congratulating themselves on how well their plan was working, that spark grew hotter. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a foolish old woman, too trusting and naive to fight back. They'd counted on my love for them to keep me silent and compliant. They'd weaponized my kindness and turned it into my greatest vulnerability. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. I pressed my palms against the floor and pushed myself up, my joints protesting with every movement. I caught sight of myself in the mirror across the room, hair wild, eyes red and swollen, looking every bit like the broken victim they expected me to be. But as I stared at my reflection, I remembered who I was before this nightmare began. I was Margaret Chen. I'd immigrated to this country at 22 years old with $10 in my pocket and a determination to build a better life. I'd learned English by watching soap operas and reading children's books at the library. I'd worked as a janitor, a waitress, and a factory worker before finally saving enough money to go to college. I'd raised 3 children alone after Thomas died, working 2 jobs and surviving on 4 hours of sleep. I'd taught in one of the toughest school districts in California for 30 years, dealing with budget cuts, overcrowded classrooms, and students who came from broken homes. I'd broken up fights, counseled traumatized children, and spent my own money on school supplies because the district couldn't afford them. I'd survived poverty, racism, sexism, and the grief of losing my soulmate. I'd faced down angry parents, incompetent administrators, and a system designed to make me fail. And I'd never, ever given up. These children, these selfish, greedy strangers who happened to share my DNA, they thought they could break me? They thought I'd just roll over and accept my destruction? The anger in my chest blazed into something fierce and unbreakable. I walked to my bathroom, washed my face with cold water, and looked at myself again. This time, I didn't see a victim. I saw a warrior. Battered and wounded, yes, but not defeated. Never defeated. Chen women don't break, I whispered to my reflection, repeating Thomas's words like a prayer. We bend, and then we straighten up stronger. I walked back to my office with purpose, ignoring the pain in my arthritic knees. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My hands didn't shake anymore. My vision was clear. My mind was sharp. If David and Sarah wanted a war, I'd give them one. But they were about to learn a lesson I'd taught hundreds of students over my career. Actions have consequences. I opened Google and typed, Elder Financial Abuse Lawyer, Sacramento. A list of results appeared, but one name immediately caught my attention. Morrison and Associates, Elder Law, Specialists. I clicked on the website and scanned the attorney profiles. Then I saw her, Patricia Morrison, Senior Partner. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that face. Older now, professional and polished in her business suit, but I'd know those eyes anywhere. Patricia Reynolds. I'd taught her in second grade, back in 1987. She'd been a bright, determined little girl with pigtails and a fierce sense of justice. She used to stay after class to help me clean the classroom, talking nonstop about how she wanted to be a lawyer someday and help people who get treated unfairly. I'd written her a college recommendation letter. I'd gone to her law school graduation. And now, here she was, specializing in exactly the kind of case I needed. Some people would call it coincidence. I called it fate. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the screen. My heart pounded, but my hand was steady. A receptionist answered. Morrison and Associates, how may I help you? My name is Margaret Chen, I said, my voice calm and clear. I need to speak with Patricia Morrison. Tell her it's Mrs. Chen, her second grade teacher. Tell her I need help. And tell her... I paused, choosing my words carefully. Tell her it's about my children committing elder abuse and fraud. There was a brief pause. Please hold, Mrs. Chen. Less than 30 seconds later, Patricia's voice came through the phone, filled with shock and concern. Mrs. Chen, is that really you? Hello, Patricia, I said softly. I'm sorry to call you like this, but I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. And I need your help. Tell me everything, she said immediately. Don't leave out a single detail. So I did. I told her about the forged insurance claims, the reverse mortgage, the stolen savings, the credit cards, the business loan. I told her about the emails between David and Sarah, planning my destruction like it was a business transaction. I told her everything, my voice never wavering, my resolve never faltering. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Patricia spoke, and her voice was filled with cold fury. Mrs. Chen, you were my favorite teacher. You believed in me when nobody else did. You changed my life. And I promise you, on everything I hold sacred, we're going to bury them. For the first time in days, I smiled. The fight had begun. Patricia came to my house that same evening, carrying a leather briefcase and a look of fierce determination that reminded me of the little girl she used to be. She hugged me tightly at the door, and I felt some of the weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't alone anymore. We sat at my kitchen table for 4 hours, spreading out every document, every email, every piece of evidence across the surface. Patricia took meticulous notes, occasionally shaking her head in disgust as she read the emails between David and Sarah. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder financial abuse I've ever seen, she said, tapping her pen against her legal pad. The emails alone are damning. They document premeditation, conspiracy, and intent to defraud. Mrs. Chen, your children are going to prison for this. I need you to understand something, Patricia, I said quietly. I don't want revenge for the sake of revenge, but I need justice. I need them to face consequences, and I need to make sure they never do this to anyone else. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We'll get you justice. I promise. But we need to be strategic. They think you're helpless and confused. We're going to use that assumption against them. Over the next 2 weeks, we built our case with military precision. Step 1. Document everything. Patricia had me request records from every bank, credit card company, insurance provider, and financial institution involved. We created a timeline of every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every stolen dollar. The paper trail was devastating, and it all pointed directly at David. Step 2. Install security cameras. Patricia recommended a company that specialized in covert surveillance. Within 48 hours, I had cameras hidden in my living room, kitchen, office, and front porch. If David tried to return to destroy evidence or intimidate me, we'd have video proof. The footage uploaded automatically to a cloud server that only Patricia and I could access. Step 3. Set the trap. This was Patricia's idea, and it was brilliant. We needed more evidence, particularly something that showed Sarah's direct involvement. So far, we only had emails. We needed more. I left my checkbook on the kitchen counter, deliberately visible, along with a fake document Patricia had created on official-looking letterhead. It claimed I had a life insurance policy worth $300,000, payable upon my death to my designated beneficiary. The document was completely fake, but it looked authentic. Then I did something that made my stomach turn. I invited David's girlfriend, Monica, over for coffee. Monica was sweet but naive, and she was still in contact with David despite their breakup. I knew anything I told her would go straight back to him. Over tea and cookies, I mentioned casually that I'd been organizing my estate planning documents. Getting everything in order, at my age, I said with a deliberately shaky voice. Making sure everything's ready. The life insurance paperwork, the will, all of it. Monica's eyes lit up with interest. That's very responsible, Mrs. Chen. I left the room briefly to use the bathroom, giving her time to see the documents I'd strategically left on the counter. When I returned, I noticed she'd moved slightly and the papers were at a different angle. Perfect. Step 4. Legal action. Patricia filed a police report with the Sacramento Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, presenting our evidence to Detective Sarah Kwan, who specialized in elder abuse cases. She also filed a complaint with the California Department of Insurance Fraud Division. We submitted the forged documents to a handwriting analyst who confirmed what I already knew. The signatures were forgeries, though sophisticated ones. Patricia also filed emergency motions to freeze all accounts associated with David and Sarah, preventing them from moving or hiding any more assets. We requested court orders for their bank records, phone records, and email accounts. Step 5. Bring in Michael. I called my youngest son and told him everything. Michael wept with rage when he learned what his siblings had done. Mom, I had no idea. I swear to God, I had no idea. He'd been kept completely in the dark, just as the emails had indicated. Michael immediately offered to help however he could. He provided character witness statements, helped us locate additional financial records, and stood by me when I needed family support. The trap was set. The evidence was gathered. The legal machinery was in motion. Now all we had to do was wait for David and Sarah to make their next move. And according to Detective Kwan, people this greedy always made a next move. They think they're getting away with it, Patricia said as we reviewed the plan one final time. They think you're too weak or too confused to fight back. That overconfidence is going to be their downfall. I looked at the evidence spread across my kitchen table, the timeline of fraud, the forged signatures, the emails plotting my destruction, and felt that fierce determination burning in my chest again. My children had taught me a terrible lesson. Trust can be weaponized, love can be exploited, and family doesn't always mean loyalty. But I was about to teach them something far more important. Underestimating Margaret Chen was the biggest mistake they'd ever make. The court hearing was scheduled for Friday, November 15th at 9 in the morning. I didn't sleep the night before. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind cycling through everything that was about to happen. This was it, the moment of truth. Either justice would prevail or my children would walk away free while I faced criminal charges for crimes I didn't commit. Patricia had called me the evening before with news that made my heart race. "David took the bait," she said, barely containing her excitement. Detective Kwan just informed me that he attempted to file another fraudulent claim yesterday, this time for that fake life insurance policy you left visible. He forged your signature again, claiming you'd updated your beneficiary to him. He's getting desperate and sloppy. That night, I chose my outfit carefully. The navy blue dress I'd worn to Thomas's funeral 20 years ago. It still fit, though a bit looser now. I wanted to look dignified, strong, but also like what I was, a 72-year-old woman who'd been victimized by her own children. I pinned my hair up in a neat bun and put on the small pearl earrings Thomas had given me on our 25th anniversary. Michael arrived at 7:30 to drive me to the courthouse. He hugged me tight in the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. "You've got this, Mom, we've got this. I'm right here beside you." The Sacramento County Courthouse was an imposing building of granite and glass. As we walked up the steps, I felt my knees trembling, but I kept my head high. Patricia met us in the lobby, looking sharp and professional in a charcoal suit, carrying 2 briefcases full of evidence. "They're both here," she said quietly. "David arrived 20 minutes ago with his attorney. Sarah got here 10 minutes ago with hers. They're not sitting together. I don't think they know how much trouble they're in." We walked through security and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway outside courtroom 3B was crowded. I saw neighbors from my street. Dorothy and her husband Frank, the Williamson family from next door, even young Marcus Chen, who ran the corner grocery store. Word had spread through the neighborhood about what was happening. These people had known me for decades, and they'd come to support me. Then I saw them. David stood near the courtroom doors, looking haggard and thin. He'd lost weight, and his suit hung loose on his frame. His attorney, a tired-looking man in his 50s, was speaking to him in low, urgent tones. When David saw me, his face went white. He took a step forward, mouth opening as if to speak, but Patricia moved between us. "Don't even think about approaching my client," she said coldly. 30 feet away, Sarah leaned against the wall, scrolling through her phone with studied indifference. She wore an expensive designer suit, probably paid for with my stolen money, I thought bitterly. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked up briefly when I appeared, and our eyes met for just a second. I saw no remorse there, no shame, just cold calculation and barely concealed irritation, as if this whole thing was a minor inconvenience in her busy schedule. My daughter looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was the problem. The courtroom doors opened and a bailiff stepped out. "Case number 2024 CF 8847, People versus Chen and Chen, Financial Elder Abuse and Fraud. All parties please enter." The crowd began filing in. I noticed reporters with notepads. Apparently the case had attracted media attention. "Elderly teacher robbed by own children" made for good headlines, Patricia had warned me. Inside, the courtroom was all dark wood and serious faces. The judge's bench loomed at the front, empty for now. Patricia guided me to the plaintiff's table on the right side. David and his attorney took the left table. Sarah and her attorney sat behind them. The gallery filled quickly. Michael sat directly behind me, his hand resting supportively on my shoulder. Dorothy and Frank, my neighbors, former students who'd heard what happened. Even Patricia's law partner and several paralegals had come to watch. I glanced back at David and Sarah one more time. They sat separately, not looking at each other, not looking at me. Two people who'd once been my babies, who I'd loved more than life itself, now sitting in a courtroom as defendants in a criminal case because they'd tried to destroy me. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. The Honorable Judge Rebecca Martinez presiding. Everyone stood as the judge entered, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back severely. She took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with an expression that revealed nothing. Please be seated, she said. Her voice was calm but carried absolute authority. We're here today regarding multiple counts of elder financial abuse, identity theft, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. This is a preliminary hearing to determine if sufficient evidence exists to proceed to trial. Patricia stood. Your Honor, the evidence in this case is overwhelming. We have documented fraud totaling over $400,000, premeditated conspiracy evidenced by email communications, and multiple instances of forged signatures and false insurance claims. David's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. Any financial transactions were made with Mrs. Chen's full knowledge and consent. My client was merely helping his elderly mother manage her affairs, and there's been a tragic misunderstanding. Save it for your opening statement, Counselor, Judge Martinez said dryly. Let's see this evidence. Prosecution may proceed. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Amanda Torres, stood and began presenting the case. She walked the judge through the timeline. Every forged document, every fraudulent claim, every stolen dollar. She showed the handwriting analysis proving the signatures were forgeries. She read excerpts from the emails between David and Sarah, their cold calculation and casual cruelty echoing through the silent courtroom. I watched the judge's expression shift from neutral to shocked to disgusted as the evidence mounted. Then Patricia stood to present her portion. Your Honor, I'd like to call Margaret Chen to the stand. My heart stopped. This was it. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, my hand trembling as I placed it on the Bible for the oath. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Patricia approached with a gentle smile meant to put me at ease. Mrs. Chen, can you please tell the court about your relationship with your children before this fraud began? I took a deep breath and began. I told them about raising 3 children alone after Thomas died, about working 2 jobs to give them good lives, about the sacrifices, the love, the unconditional support. My voice cracked when I described David moving back in with me after his divorce, how I'd welcomed him with open arms because I thought he needed his mother. And when did you first discover something was wrong? Patricia asked. I described the letter from the insurance company, the forged signatures, the sick feeling of realizing my own son had turned me into a criminal. Several people in the gallery were crying. I saw Dorothy wiping her eyes with a tissue. Patricia projected one of the emails on a large screen for everyone to see. Sarah's words glowed on the wall. Mom made this easy for us. She signs whatever we put in front of her. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Order! Mrs. Chen, Patricia continued, can you tell the court about the papers your son asked you to sign? The ones he said were for medical insurance? This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. He brought them to me on a Tuesday evening, I said, my voice growing stronger. He said they were just updates to my medical insurance policy, routine paperwork. I trusted him completely, so I signed without reading them carefully. I paused, looking directly at David. His face had gone pale. What I didn't realize until the police came to arrest me was that by signing those papers, I was supposedly authorizing fraudulent insurance claims totaling over $100,000. David's attorney shot to his feet. Objection, this is... But here's what my son didn't expect, I continued, raising my voice slightly. Here's what he didn't think I would remember. I reached into my purse and pulled out a photograph, a picture I'd taken of the original insurance documents before I'd signed them. something I'd done out of habit from my years of teaching and keeping records. Patricia took the photo and projected it on the screen, enlarged so everyone could see every detail. "There's a second signature line on these documents," I said, pointing to the screen. "Right there, below where I signed, a line for a secondary beneficiary or authorized party, and the name written there, written in my son's handwriting before he ever gave me the papers to sign, is my daughter, Sarah's name." The courtroom exploded. Gasps and shocked exclamations echoed off the walls. Sarah jumped to her feet, her composure shattering like glass. "That's a lie," she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "She's confused. She's an old woman who doesn't understand what she's looking at. This is insane." Judge Martinez banged her gavel hard. "Miss Chen, sit down immediately or I will hold you in contempt." But Sarah was spiraling, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "She's making this up. David acted alone. I had nothing to do with any of this." She turned to her brother, her voice venomous. Tell them this was all you." David stood up, his face red with fury and panic. "Are you kidding me? You were the one who came up with the whole plan. You told me exactly how to forge her signatures. You said we deserved that money after everything we'd put up with." "That's enough." Judge Martinez's voice cracked like a whip. "Both of you, sit down now." But the damage was done. In their panic and desperation, David and Sarah had turned on each other, each trying to throw the other under the bus, each admission more damaging than the last. Patricia stood calmly, letting their self-destruction play out. She didn't need to say another word. They were destroying their own defense better than any prosecutor could. The prosecutor, Amanda Torres, stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we have additional evidence. We subpoenaed the defendant's bank records, as you approved last week." She held up a thick folder. "These records show that over the past 6 months, David Chen deposited $110,000 into Sarah Chen's personal account in 17 separate transactions. The deposits correspond exactly with the dates of the fraudulent insurance claim payments." She projected bank statements on the screen. There it was in black and white. Transaction after transaction. Proof of the conspiracy. Proof that they'd split the stolen money exactly as their emails had promised. Sarah's attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. David's attorney was frantically whispering to his client, probably telling him to stop talking. But it was too late. The truth was out, exposed in the bright fluorescent lights of the courtroom for everyone to see. I sat in the witness box, watching my children destroy each other, and felt nothing but a cold, distant sadness. These weren't the babies I'd raised. These were strangers who'd worn my children's faces while they plotted my destruction. Judge Martinez looked at David and Sarah with undisguised contempt. "I've been on this bench for 19 years, and this is one of the most despicable cases I've encountered. This court will recess for 30 minutes while I review the evidence. But I'll tell you right now, there will be criminal trials for both defendants. Bailiff, please escort them to holding." As the bailiffs approached David and Sarah, the reality of their situation seemed to finally hit them. David's legs buckled, and his attorney had to steady him. Sarah stood frozen, her face drained of all color, her expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. They were led out of the courtroom in different directions, not looking at each other, not looking at me. Just two criminals who'd finally been caught. The trials happened 6 weeks later, in early January. Winter had settled over Sacramento, cold and gray, matching the emptiness I felt inside. David and Sarah were tried separately, but the outcomes were equally devastating for them. David's trial lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury took less than 2 hours to return a verdict, guilty on all counts: identity theft, elder financial abuse, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud. When the judge read the sentence, 4 years in federal prison, full restitution of all stolen funds, and a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me, David collapsed in his chair, sobbing. His attorney had to help him stand. I sat in the gallery watching my son, my firstborn, the baby I'd carried for 9 months and loved for 43 years, being led away in handcuffs. I waited to feel something: satisfaction, vindication, even sadness. But there was only numbness, a vast empty space where my love for him used to be. Sarah's trial was even more damning. The prosecution painted her as the mastermind, the one who'd conceived the plan and manipulated her desperate brother into executing it. Her emails showed cold calculation and strategic thinking. She'd researched elder financial abuse laws specifically to find loopholes. She'd coached David on how to forge my signature. She'd set up shell accounts to hide the money. The jury convicted her in under 90 minutes. Judge Martinez sentenced her to 3 years in federal prison, full restitution of all funds plus damages, and a restraining order identical to David's. Sarah didn't cry. She just stood there, stone-faced, as if this were happening to someone else. When the bailiffs approached, she finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't remorse or shame. It was hatred. Pure, venomous hatred, as if I were the villain in this story for daring to hold her accountable. That look told me everything I needed to know. Even now, facing prison, she still believed she was entitled to my money. She still believed I owed her. I turned away and walked out of the courtroom. I never looked back. The legal aftermath took months to untangle. Patricia worked tirelessly to reverse the damage. The reverse mortgage was voided when the bank acknowledged the forged signatures. The fraudulent credit cards were discharged. The business loan was canceled. My credit score was restored. The insurance companies, facing a public relations nightmare after media coverage of the elderly teacher robbed by her own children, went viral, settled quickly and generously. They returned all the stolen funds plus additional damages for emotional distress. I received $340,000, more than enough to restore everything David and Sarah had taken, plus a substantial cushion for my future. But money couldn't restore what they'd truly stolen: my ability to trust, my sense of family, my peace of mind. Michael stepped in to help me navigate the practical matters. Together, we opened new bank accounts that only I could access. We set up a trust that protected my assets from any future attempts at exploitation. He checked on me daily, sometimes twice a day, making sure I was eating, sleeping, managing. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said one evening over tea in my kitchen. "Sorry that I didn't see what they were doing. Sorry that I wasn't there to protect you." "You couldn't have known," I told him gently. "They were careful. They manipulated everyone, not just me." But the truth was, I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Every room held ghosts, not of the family I'd loved, but of the lie I'd believed for so long. I walked through the hallways and saw David practicing his forgery. I sat in the kitchen and remembered Sarah plotting my destruction over the phone. Even Thomas's garden felt tainted. Now, like everything beautiful in my life had been poisoned. So I sold the house. It hurt to let it go, but staying hurt more. Michael helped me find a small cottage 15 minutes from his home in East Sacramento. It had 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and big windows that let in lots of light. It felt safe, clean, untainted by betrayal. I planted a new garden, roses and tomatoes, just like Thomas's. Some things were worth keeping, even when starting over. Patricia refused to accept full payment for her legal work. "You changed my life, Mrs. Chen. You made me believe I could be something more than the poor kid from the bad neighborhood. This is me paying that forward." She did accept a modest fee, but only after I insisted. Word of my case spread through the community. Other elderly victims of financial abuse started reaching out, asking for help, sharing their own stories of being exploited by family members. So I started volunteering at Patricia's law firm 2 days a week, helping other seniors navigate the system, offering support and understanding from someone who'd survived it. Helping others helped me heal. Each person I assisted, each case we won, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that David and Sarah had tried to destroy. My life became smaller, but more genuine. I had Michael and his family, my grandchildren who visited often, who climbed into my lap and asked me to read stories, who reminded me that not all family bonds are corrupted by greed. I had Dorothy and my true friends. I had my volunteer work. I had my little cottage and my garden. On my 73rd birthday, Michael's family threw me a small party. Just 8 of us around my new kitchen table, eating cake and laughing at silly jokes. No David, no Sarah, just the people who actually loved me. As I blew out the candles, I realized something profound. I'd lost 2 children, but I'd gained something more valuable. I'd gained myself back, my strength, my dignity, my knowledge that I was worth fighting for. I was no longer a victim, I was a survivor, and that was worth more than all the money David and Sarah had tried to steal. It's been 8 months since the trials ended, 8 months since I watched my children being led away in handcuffs, 8 months since my life shattered, and I had to rebuild it from broken pieces. People ask me sometimes if I regret turning them in, if I regret sending my own children to prison. The answer is always the same. I regret that they forced me to make that choice. I regret that their greed destroyed our family. But I don't regret seeking justice, not for 1 second. Because what they did wasn't just about money, it was about respect, about recognizing that I'm a human being with dignity and rights, not just a resource to be exploited until there's nothing left. They saw me as weak, as disposable, as someone whose entire life could be dismantled for their convenience. They were wrong. I learned something painful but important through this nightmare. Love is not supposed to hurt. Family is not supposed to destroy you, and sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. For 72 years, I believed that if you loved your children unconditionally, sacrificed everything for them, and put them first in every decision, they would honor that love. I believed that family meant loyalty, that blood was thicker than water, that a mother's love could never be betrayed. But love without boundaries is not love. It's exploitation waiting to happen. And sacrifice without reciprocity is not noble. It's enabling people to take you for granted. David and Sarah taught me the hardest lesson of my life. Trust must be earned, not given freely just because someone shares your DNA. They taught me that sometimes letting go of toxic people, even when those people are your own children, is not cruelty, it's survival. I think about other elderly people out there, people who might be going through what I went through, people who notice small inconsistencies, feel that nagging doubt, but push it away because family would never hurt me. I want them to know, trust your instincts, protect yourself. You are not being paranoid or suspicious for wanting to verify things. You are being smart. Financial abuse of the elderly is one of the fastest growing crimes in America, and 70% of the time, it's committed by family members, children, grandchildren, people we trust most, people we raised and loved and sacrificed everything for. If you see the warning signs, unusual account activity, documents you didn't sign, family members suddenly very interested in your finances, don't ignore them. Don't make excuses. Investigate, protect yourself. Get help. Because at the end of the day, you deserve security. You deserve peace. You deserve to enjoy the retirement you worked your entire life to build, without fear that the people you love will steal it from you. I lost 2 children, but I discovered something more valuable. My own strength, my resilience, my refusal to be broken by people who underestimated me. I'm 73 years old now. I live in a small cottage with a garden that's just starting to bloom. I volunteer helping other elderly victims find their voices and fight back. I spend time with Michael and his children, building new memories that aren't tainted by betrayal. I have friends who chose to be in my life not because of what they can take from me, but because they genuinely care. My life is smaller now, but it's real. It's honest. It's mine. And every morning when I wake up, I look in the mirror and see someone I'm proud of. Not a victim, not a fool who was easy to manipulate, but a survivor who refused to stay silent, a fighter who stood up when it would have been easier to give up. Margaret Chen, teacher, mother, survivor, warrior. That's who I am, and no one, not even my own children, can take that away from me. So I want to ask you something. What would you do if your own children betrayed you like this? If the people you loved most in the world, the people you sacrificed everything for, turned around and tried to destroy you, would you have the strength to fight back? Or would you let them win because you can't bear to see them face consequences? Would you choose justice, or would you choose silence to protect people who don't deserve protection? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts. Would you be able to turn in your own child? Or is family loyalty more important than justice? If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about courage, betrayal, survival, and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they think. And remember, you are never too old to fight back. You are never too weak to demand respect. And you are never, ever obligated to let people hurt you just because you love them. Family should be built on love, not exploitation. Trust should be earned, not weaponized. And when someone betrays you, even someone you love, you have every right to protect yourself. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, Chen women don't break. We bend, and then we straighten up stronger. Take care of yourselves, protect yourselves, and never let anyone, not even family, make you feel like you don't deserve justice. Until next time.